you ready for this? It's showtime. Lights, fans, action. Oh yeah, we've got action. Faster, tougher, more ferocious. There's nothing like league. This is the Betfred Super League.
Got me here. It took a big chunk out of me. Bleeding. It's bleeding. Oh no, it's bleeding. The thing just ripped my ear off. What do you think?
Welcome to another edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast, with special thanks as always to Betfred for their support for us. This week, one of my special one-on-one interviews is coming up, and if you want to know what's going on in the big, wide, wonderful world of rugby league, you go to the very top. So can I say thank you to Nigel Wood OBE, the newly appointed chairman of the Rugby Football League, a man steeped in rugby league, first as a player. His career was cut short by injury very early on. Administrator, chief executive officer, who left the top job 7 years ago, but now who's back in charge, and the man believed by the likes of Eamon McManus at St Helens and Derek Beaumont at Lee as someone who can save the game. Nigel, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So you're back. Now look, there's an old saying in the world, never go back. What on earth's going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something I've thought about a lot myself. Technically, I'm not actually going back. They've asked me to chair the RFL and Rugby League commercial for a period of time. It's not an executive appointment. It's slightly different. We've got competent and good chief executives in both of those businesses. I think that there is a little bit of introspection going on around the sport. I think there are a few challenges that the clubs in particular want different answers to, and they asked me if I'd get involved. So, you were kind enough to kind of mention my back catalogue, so to speak, and it's significant. Rugby league is my sport. It will always be my sport. I care about it deeply. If it's got some travails and some challenges, then I'm more than willing to devote whatever time and previous experience I've got to try and benefit the whole of the sport of rugby league. And I do sometimes, when I know we live in a different world, and I do sometimes wonder when you read some of the media stuff and some of the social media and criticisms, why do it? But you know what, the sport needs a bit of help at the moment, and I'm delighted to give it whatever I can.
Well, you were here originally for 16, 17 years before you walked away 2018 from the RFL. You masterminded 4 of the biggest ever broadcast deals in the history of the game. Looking at that, first of all, why do you think we've fallen behind in terms of television rights? I mean, even darts, allegedly, is being paid more than rugby league at the minute.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that the broadcasting landscape has changed. I would say that there's been, if you like, 3 eras of broadcasting. You and I are both men of a certain age, Eddie. We'll remember when everything was just terrestrial and analogue, so it's BBC One, BBC Two, ITV Channel 4 and then Channel 5. That world changed in the early 90s with British satellite broadcasting and Sky, and then a whole new market was created, this kind of subscription-based market, and people consuming sport and other content by being prepared to pay more than they would do than just a licence fee or an advertising. And that was a remarkable success, and great credit to everybody who was involved. And that was, I would think, between about 1992 right through to probably 5 or 6 years ago. But that really is a supply pushed offer, really. If you want to buy rugby league, you buy a subscription. It's that, and you take everything and things are bundled together. What's happened, I think, in the last decade, or half a decade anyways, we've gone to more of a streaming service. We've got more to what I would call demand pulled rather than supply pushed. So people can pick and choose the things that they need to buy. So the options for consuming content, whether that content is sport or whether it's music or whether it's books or whatever it may be, has changed, and society has changed. You know, I've got a son who would not really sit down and watch 80 minutes of sport. He wants to consume his sport on a different device. He wants bite-sized chunks, and he doesn't really want to pay for it. So, so we have to, sport, like any other content provider, has to evolve and react to changing market conditions. So it's not appropriate just to kind of pass individual comments. It's about whether people have done good jobs or bad jobs. It's simply the environment that I think we're now in a different era of sports consumption, and as an industry, we have to work out how we can cope with that.
Do you think the new TV deal, which has to come because the Sky agreement runs out at the end of 2026, is that your biggest challenge that you face?
Probably, but I think it's I think there's been some adverse currents against the sport over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. I would say there's been a £30 million swing against the sport. You know, some of that is income reduction, which is broadcast, and some of that is cost increase. You know, talent costs more money, power, light, heat costs more money. We've got COVID still being paid for by many of the clubs that borrowed money to survive through the COVID period. So I think there's been a £30 million swing against the sport, and I think all of that pain has been pushed downstream to club owners, and club owners are saying, you know, this is not what we signed up for, and that's one of the reasons why they asked for a different executive lead, effectively, and a different set of policies and strategies at the centre to say what can we do to actually make it a more sustainable offer, and that's probably what the biggest brief is.
We were told when IMG came in that they had the responsibility to grow the sport, to do the next TV deal, increase revenue. Now, look, Stevo's given me a few questions he wants me to ask you, and the first one is about IMG. He says, are they gone? He says, allegedly they agreed a 10-year deal, and to use his words, they've done nothing. They've done nothing in the 2 or 3 years they've been involved.
So I think it was a 12-year deal, right. And I think that
was it 2 free and the next 10 to be paid for?
I don't probably.
It wasn't on your watch.
I wasn't. I don't. You know, forgive me. I don't know the detail of that. I think it's a harsh assessment that they've done nothing. They are certainly at the moment associated with a grading system that looked an awful lot like a licensing system from a previous life, and they get traduced quite a lot in that. People don't talk about the rugby league grading system; they just say under IMG, and I think they'll have to be mindful of that, because if it does deliver any bizarre outcomes, which grading can do, the people will be saying that's an IMG issue.
They have been a silent partner, haven't they? We've not heard from IMG at all. They said originally, London, we must have a successful team in London.
Yeah.
For the game to grow, because that's where obviously all the big business is done. Their first job, or their first decision, it seems to us, was that they relegated London Broncos just after they won promotion. They said, whatever happens, they're not going to be there in 2025.
Yeah, well, they didn't relegate them. The grading system that they introduced.
But they introduced that.
I get that. So the point I was going on to make is that, in addition to, they are at the moment just associated pretty one-dimensionally with the grading system, but the reality is they are doing other work that's probably not as visible. They're doing some good work on commercial evaluation, supporting Rodri Jones and the team at Rugby League Commercial. They're doing quite a bit of work with supporting the centre in terms of its digital programmes. So I think it's also slightly unfair to say we haven't heard anything from them, because they are.
We haven't.
Well, I know, but they are agents of the sport of rugby league, and it's not necessarily, in the same way we might hire legal advisors or we might hire accountants. You wouldn't expect them to be standing on the steps telling everybody what they're doing. You'd expect the people who are running the sport to do a better job of doing that. So the answer to your question is, it's an existing contract. I think it does need what you would say a court of looking at to make sure that it still works for the sport and it still works for IMG, because at the moment I'm not sure it works well enough for either party.
To be fair, the game itself at your level, IMG, the clubs are always very vocal, aren't they? Of course, they believe that they run the game. They probably do, but no one, certainly for the past 18 months, has really said anything about anything. If I'm honest, and this is the first time, because you've come back, you're on podcasts, you've written an article in the trade press. Good on you, well done, and you're sitting in front of microphones and talking.
I think that's a fair challenge. I think that I don't think there's been a public face of the sport that's significant, and I think that's probably one of the gaps. It's not necessarily what I put my hand up to do. I think there are people that are better at it than I am, but the reality is every sport needs a visible leader, somewhere where the buck stops, and I'm not sure that that's been too visible over the last. So I tend to agree. I'm happy to do it for as long as I'm involved. When I say I'm happy to do it, it's not, as I say, it's not the most comfortable thing, but I do think it needs to be done. And if you're going to put your hand up to volunteer to do something, you have to take the rough with the smooth. And I'm committed to try and reset the course of the sport on an upward trajectory. That's what I'm determined to do. And then if I can do that, I'm very happy to pass the baton on to, younger, fitter, brighter people that can take it round the next bend.
The game in France, Catalan Dragons and Salford. Let's talk about Catalan first of all, and Toulouse. There's a lot of people within the game at club level who don't want them in the competition. Now, to me, and to thousands of people out there, Catalan Dragons is the success story of the Super League era since 2006. We take thousands of fans over there. They have a wonderful time. They're not necessarily between Widnes and Hull on the M62. They see the world. Brilliant. Stevo loves his white wine. Can't get enough of it. But the clubs in this country think, well, they don't bring anything over. They don't sell a pie. We don't buy a seat. We don't buy a pint in France. Why are they in? They should be got rid of. What's your view?
So, you'll recall one of the disadvantages of being as old as we are, Eddie, is we can remember, and particularly when you've got a back catalogue, we can remember the original reasons to do things. So you'll recall back in '96, you will have been there at the Charlotte Stadium when Paris Saint-Germain kicked off against Sheffield Eagles.
And European Super League is on the way.
Correct, and there you go. You remember it, and so they played there for a year. Halfway through '97, they decamped to the south of France, and then they resigned from the league, or they took a temporary suspension, and then they never came back. In about 2004, the International Federation contacted the RFL and said, if you don't put a professional club back into your pyramid, then we'll lose professional rugby league in France. That was the kind of, not ultimatum, but that was the kind of line of thought. And to the immense credit of the British clubs, the immense credit, they voted to include a club from outside of their membership at the expense of one of their own. I think in that year, I think it was 2006, I think we relegated 2 clubs. I think it might have been Widnes and Lee, if I remember rightly, to accommodate Catalan. And we gave Catalan an exemption from relegation because of their unique circumstances. The objectives behind that project were threefold, really. Number one was to strengthen the French national team, because it's important that England or Great Britain have international opponents in this hemisphere, in the same way New Zealand are international opponents for Australia. The second objective was to actually develop the market in France and to create some revenues from France or from Europe, whether they be broadcast revenues or commercial revenues. And the third objective, which is the one you've referred to, is to give supporters a destination that wasn't between the Humber and the Mersey, effectively. I would say, as one of the architects of including both Catalan and Toulouse, that only the latter of those 3 objectives have been met.
Yeah, the French international game has gone backwards, hasn't it?
Well, they were previously ranked top 4, top 5, and now they're not, and they can't get out of group matches. And the challenge I think we have with involvement of French clubs in the British competition is they have to have a wider responsibility than just providing a destination for stag weekends, frankly. I'm not being funny, but that's, and when we originally put them in, there was a commitment to develop French talent. And the reality is, a couple of years ago, the French first team couldn't beat what was an England at least second, possibly third team. There was a weekend, I think, a double-headed weekend with the men and the women. They didn't score a try. Last year, the national team, England versus France, was played as a curtain raiser or a match to support the Toulouse team. That's not the kind of positioning of international rugby league that it should be. So, we can't just say it's been a rip-roaring success if some of the fundamental parts. But even now, there are no broadcast revenues that come out of France. So
they're paying a lot of the fees for the British clubs to go over there.
They are paying. So the investment. I don't want this to talk just about money, and it sounds like I'm sticking the boot in the French Rugby League. I'm not. I think we've got a fraternity with French Rugby League, and we've almost got a paternal requirement to assist the development of rugby league in France. I think the question that has to be asked is the balance quite right at the moment? And I'm not sure it is.
Bottom line, will they be in Super League next year, Catalan Dragons?
I don't see any reason why not. I think that's yes. And there's nobody sat hatching a plot to try and remove the Catalans from the competition. What people want to do is challenge the basis on which they're involved in, because we all have to pay our way. And currently, the British game, which is supported by the broadcast contract, over the last 20 years has put £40 million into French Rugby League. And the question is, are we getting value for that? Because there are people within France, by the way, who think that the French clubs should be playing in a French league and strengthening the French league, which is quite a unique thing.
I've heard that before. They say there should be a French Super League.
Well, of course.
But it's not big enough, Nigel, is it?
Well, you could certainly it's certainly weakened by having two clubs that are not playing in it.
But you could have a Rangers and Celtic situation, that they will win everything. Catalan and Toulouse will win the lot in France if you do that.
So I think the question is this: there are enough stresses and strains trying to protect rugby league in Great Britain, let alone take on the responsibilities for running the game all over the Northern Hemisphere. When you are getting significant broadcast contracts, you can afford to be a bit more expansive, and you can afford to be a little bit less troubled by what the ledger says at the end of the week. But at the end of the day, we're not in those times, and we've got, a question I would say is why would you have why would you have a Catalan team in but not a London team in, when at least with a London team you're going to get broadcast contract? You can make a contribution to the broadcast contract. That's the reality. A lot of this is, I'm afraid, revolves around money. It revolves around money. So people, there's a different spectrum of views. So some people think there just shouldn't be. Some very influential people think that there should be no French clubs because they don't make a contribution, and there are other people that think they should be in regardless. But I'm kind of sit in the middle, which is there's room for French clubs in the British pyramid, but they have to make a contribution, and that contribution has got to be something other than just somewhere for fans to go
and have a good weekend. I understand that completely. Now, you've got prominent support from owners of Super League clubs, as I say, men like Eamon McManus. He says you have inherited the biggest hospital pass in rugby league history to deal with the psychodrama that is Salford. What's really going on at Salford? Because they seem to be going hand to mouth, week to week, getting battered on the field. You feel so sorry for Paul Rowley, his players, the club, the supporters. I mean, Stevo believes that they should never have been allowed to kick off in Super League this year, and the first result against St Helens proves that. I know this is all pre your time. What's your view on Salford? How can we help them? How can Salford survive? They're an old and famous club. David Watkins, for instance, Keith Fielding. We go back years.
One of my earliest experiences was, sat on a wall watching the 1974 playoff match between Salford and Bradford Northern at the time. So I'm acutely aware Friday night football down at the Willows was kind of made popular before anybody devised it. They appear to have got, I don't know intimately what happened before I was here, but it seems to be no more complicated than at the end of the day there isn't an ownership group there that's capable of putting the money in that's required to stabilise the club, and they're not the first club to have financial difficulties. And what happens is you undertake an active administration, you recover, you recoup, you might step out of the division, or you have those consequences. You know that Wakefield have done it, Bradford have done it, you know other clubs have done it in the recent past. They have limped on the basis of promised investment which hasn't been forthcoming. It's unacceptable to the sport. It's unacceptable for the human beings involved that they're subjected to that kind of uncertainty, prolonged uncertainty. I mean, things do go wrong in life. And things do go wrong in business. You know, businesses do have financial difficulties, and when you do, you know, difficult things happen. But to have such a protracted, prolonged kind of problem isn't acceptable.
No. And they owe a fortune, allegedly. They owe a fortune all over the place.
Well,
inland revenue, the game itself.
I think
will they be there next year, Nigel? Will they be there by the end of this season?
Everybody's worked really hard to make sure that they could fill the fixture list. I think it's a very interesting point that Stevo made about should they have started the season. And you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and people made decisions with the best of intentions back last October and November, but it might turn out when we investigate those decisions that the unintended consequences were that all that's happened is that we've had a stricken animal in the competition with a scar that's recurred every week. Although great credit to the players that have played and the coaching staff, they keep picking up a win, you know, in the most adverse of circumstances. It's an ugly, unedifying sight. It hasn't done the sport any favours. The root cause is, at the end of the day, there isn't an ownership group there that is apparently either capable of or prepared to, one of the two, putting the resources in that are needed to stabilise the ship. Everybody wishes everybody well at Salford. They are a good rugby league nation, a good rugby league club. It's a massive area. The Greater Manchester conurbation is a massive area. We need a presence there. It needs to be fixed up.
It does. And sort of on the back of all that, we have Las Vegas. Where are you standing on the Las Vegas? I'll call it an experiment. I won't call it a gimmick because, you know, fantastic. Again, 30,000 went on the stag weekend to Las Vegas to watch Warrington and Wigan. Wasn't the match that we all expected. Leeds Hull KR are going there next year, costing the clubs hundreds of thousands of pounds, I am led to believe. Where are you on this? Should we be investing that money here rather than going and helping out the NRL?
So I'm completely relaxed about clubs deciding to do things for their own merits and for their own profile building. I think
at that sort of cost,
that's their decision. There's no central resource going there. I'm not sure. I think there is a cost there, but I also think there's revenues that come with it. I don't think either of the. I don't know. It's Warrington's and Wigan's business about what the P&L account looked like for their excursion. As a profile building exercise, I think it's all right. I think it's good. I think people talk about it. I think it showcases the game, the sport in a different area. And we've just talked about the attractions of going to Catalan and giving supporters destinations that are a bit. If you follow rugby league, if you follow soccer, one of the leading clubs, football, you'd be all over Europe every. You'd be finding money to go to France or Italy or Germany or Spain or Portugal. You just do it as a matter of course. If you followed rugby union, you'd be flying to Dublin or to Paris or to Rome or to Cardiff or to Wales, and you might be going on a Lions tour to Australia, a rugby union Lions tour that is, or you might go to South Africa or New Zealand. So people, giving supporters more of what they want isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. That's what business. Give supporters what they want. If the clubs choose to do it and it builds profile for those brands, that's a good thing as well. So I'm completely relaxed about it because it's not consuming any of the sport's scarce resources from this competition. So crack on. Good luck. I absolutely hope it's a great success. I hope that anybody who puts a hand up to do it, and there are more clubs that are prepared to do it, if they get something from it, they are. But these clubs are run by rational, intelligent business people who are saying, well, we're doing it because there's a reason to do it.
OK, here's another one from Stevo for you now about the proposed merger, takeover, whatever you want to call it, of the NRL. He thinks, as do a few others, the NRL involvement is the golden bullet. And you say there isn't a golden bullet, but he says this is the golden bullet that'll solve all of our problems. Do you think it is?
So I think there are only two professional rugby leagues on the planet. There's the NRL and there's the RFL Super League. And for this sport to ever unlock the potential of ourselves, there needs to be close collaboration between the NRL and the Super League. Why would there not be? You'll remember a time when we reintroduced the World Club Challenge back in 2001.
And they took it away from us this year because of Las Vegas.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's the you may say that. The Northern Hemisphere has been fully committed to the close collaboration of both clubs. In 2014, 2015, we went to a 3v3 World Club Challenge, I think. Brought 3 teams over. The risk, as always, with the Northern Hemisphere in terms of paying for it, putting the games on, taking that chance. Internationals, there is no greater advocate of international rugby league than myself and others in the Northern Hemisphere. We rebuilt the sport after the 2000 World Cup on the back of Wayne Bennett bringing over the Kangaroos in 2001, 2003, and then in the Tri-Nations in 2004, 2005, the Kiwis came in 2002, so we had international competition in the Northern Hemisphere for kind of 5-6 years out of 7.
But let's be fair, Nigel, they're not interested in international competition in the NRL, are they? Or are they?
I would hope they are. I think that rugby league's opportunity is international. That is without a doubt. And if you were to put yourself, it's far from me to kind of put myself in the shoes of Peter and Andrew, but the reality is their local competition is Australian rules football, where there isn't an international dimension. So I would see international as an opportunity to actually strike a blow for rugby for our code that doesn't exist elsewhere. I mean, to be fair, they are running the World Cup in 2026. They've put their hands up to do that. There's been significant investment in the Pacific in terms of Samoa, Tonga, PNG, and Fiji, and the Cooks. So there is a wider understanding that the role international rugby league can play. So
would you roll the red carpet out for them though, to take percentage control of our game?
So everything is negotiable. At the end of the day, the British clubs are clear about what they're looking for. Anything that can improve our product and improve our competitiveness, I think, will be looked at supportively. Why would you not? At the end of the day, the overwhelming, obviously, one cannot negotiate through a podcast.
I understand.
Even one as
award-winning,
as excellent as yours. At the end of the certain things have to remain, confidential.
Yeah, of course.
But at the end of the day, there isn't anybody on this side of the planet that wouldn't welcome a closer working relationship in whatever capacity that looks like.
They're coming over for the Ashes, obviously, and thank goodness for that. 20-odd years. It's been a long, long time, as they say, between drinks. Now, they're going to be here, I'm sure. Andrew Abdu and Peter Vlandis are going to be over here. Yeah. We're sat in a meeting room here at RL headquarters at the Etihad Stadium in Manchester. Will Peter and Andrew be on that side of the table in October, November? Will you and your board be on this side, and will a deal be thrashed out, do you think?
I can't predict that. I don't have their travel plans in the back pocket.
Would you like to meet them?
Of course. From a personal perspective, I sat on the international board for 20 years, and when the game, our sport is best when it pulls together, and it isn't just in this country. I mean, internationally. The story I would give is this, if it helps people understand. After the 2000 World Cup, which was a difficult World Cup for a number of reasons, in terms of it lost money, it wasn't probably structured as well as it should be. We decided we had to rebuild the sport on the back of closer international collaboration. You'll remember, actually, in 2001, that's when 9/11 happened, when the outrage in New York. They were coming over, and the Australians were coming over, and they pulled that tour on the back of unsafe flying conditions. And, Maurice Lindsay, who wasn't necessarily my best friend, but nevertheless, I'm happy to say he pulled that tour back together by contacting, Jeff Carr and Colin Love and the power brokers in Sydney and saying, look, we need this tour. The sport needs this. Do you know what? It's the same as in 1946. After the war, the Second World War, when Trevor Foster took the Indomitables down to, and they sailed down to Perth and they played, and because, Australia, which was then known as a colony, said we need that. We need to feel the love of the British, homeland effectively, and went and played over an extended period in Australia. That was reciprocated in 2001. So the reality is, the sport will flourish best if the two leagues work closely together in whatever guise that is.
Well, we're told also that there is interest worldwide. DAZN, the streaming service, Netflix, all the others that are out there. And there are some owners in this Super League in this country who say you don't need Sky. Go yourself. Do it yourself. Form your own streaming. Like they do in the NRL. They've got an NRL 24 hours a day streaming service over there. Listen, this is a huge, huge task you've got, isn't it? It really is.
Well, it is because we live in uncertain times, and I think that when not only the uncertain, when you've got financial straitjacket, people are looking for the best solutions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But industries have had to reinvent themselves because of changes and evolutions over time, and that's what rugby league is. There's only really football, association football, soccer that can plough on regardless, because it is so big that you've got nation states owning clubs. When you've got nation states owning clubs, they can really decide what to do. So they will kind of paddle their own canoe, and the rest of us will have to make sense of what is a changing landscape. And as I said earlier, there are things that it's nothing to do with any one broadcaster. People are choosing to consume sport in a different way, and we've got to be adept at that. And the person that you're referring to, I think, has done a fantastic job, by the way. Reinventing a club.
Derek Beaumont we're talking about here.
Playing in front of 10,000 people. Yeah. Putting on one of the best shows in Super League, along with people like Matt at Wakefield, who's just done a remarkable job, and the guys at Ulkeyard have just elevated the sport. We've now got. I would hate, although you're saying it's a big job, I think Super League's in great shape. I think it's in great shape.
On the field, no one argues. No one.
There was, I think it's the second fastest year for a million turnstile clicks. Viewing figures are strong because we've got better scheduling. There are some tweaks that you might look at in terms of just, I think, we're taking too long over video refereeing, and we're taking too long on Captain's Challenge. There's some things that I think that we can improve the broadcast product for the benefit of the consumer. I know that sounds like a lot of marketing gobbledygook, but I think we can improve that. And Rugby League has always done that. Rugby League has always been innovative and has evolved over time. So we shouldn't be too critical of ourselves, but I think that what we're trying to do is just straighten the ledger up slightly to give our club owners even more enjoyment from their investment in subsidising our sport.
It's been fantastic talking to you, and I've got so many other things that we could do a series of these. We really could. But, you in many ways now, you are the public face of the Rugby Football League. I know we've had high-profile presidents in the past. Look down the list. Andy Burnham, Tony Adams, Claire Balding, Lindsay Hoyle, the House of Commons Speaker, now Adam Hills, the TV star. We don't really use these people properly, do we? I mean, Lindsay could have opened the doors of every country worldwide. I wonder if IMG or the game spoke to him properly.
Funnily enough, I was in Speaker's House earlier on this week.
You name dropper.
I just can't help myself. I think it's been I think the decision to change the presidency from just somebody sat round the council chamber who survived longest, which is what the criteria used to be, to one where the game has picked people that can support the game, has been a terrific success. I think the various regimes over the last decade have picked some really excellent presidents. Have we used the presidencies as well as we could do? Don't know. Probably not. I think there's always an opportunity. I know Lindsay Hoyle is 150% committed to rugby league.
Absolutely.
And will do most things he possibly can. For goodness sake, in the House of Parliament 2 weeks ago, when he welcomed President Macron, he took the opportunity to remind the French president about the injustices that had been inflicted on French rugby league in the Vichy government. So we've got some champions in some good places. Do we use them as well as we could? Probably, I think we don't. And without it sounding too trite, I would hope that by the time I've finished what I'm doing, we'll be in a better position to say, yeah, we've got some good people and we're using them well.
I wonder if Lindsay asked President Macron whether he thought the Catalan Dragons would be in Super League again next year. Look, meanwhile, your strategic review continues. When will we know the outcome of that, just to end?
So people, this has got it's developed legs of its own, really. That we're not just, there's not going to be a big kind of fanfare and a reveal and the answer is 25.6 and it's going to be revealed on the 13th of December. It's a series of reviews basically about how we can evolve the game over the next 4 years. So there isn't a drum roll. The position I've accepted is until March 2026.
Can you see going beyond that?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm here because I was asked, not because I think there was unfinished business, and I don't necessarily want to kind of climb the greasy pole, and it's not really. If the clubs have confidence in what we achieve in that period of time, and I still, I'll have to talk to my family and bits and pieces. If people, if I've still got some energy for it, because then who knows? But at the end of the day, that's not what we originally signed up for. We signed up to help the sport chart a new course and an upward trajectory to make it the best version of itself it can be, to make it as attractive as possible for inward investment, whether that's from the NRL or from anywhere else. And I see that as the mission. And then when that mission's over, the cruise ships might be calling again.
I can't blame you for that. I really can't. No, that is a huge pull. Look, rugby league began with a row in 1895. It has rowed for the last 130 years. We all have faced criticism from fans, club administrators, coaches, players. You can cope with all that, though, can't you?
Well, I've had to learn to cope with it. Somebody, I once listened to Sheila Hancock offer some on a piece of radio talk about the trolls and the haters and how she ended up kind of feeling sorry for him, saying, is that really what life's about? I can't help what people I've never met think about me. They might pass judgments on me based on my physical appearance. They might not want to listen to me. They might think they know I've made decisions that I haven't made. It just kind of goes with the territory. At the end of the day, I've been around the sport for 25 years. I think I've got some pretty strong relationships with a number of people, with not just external broadcasters. There will be people that want to throw big brickbats over the garden fence. I'm a pretty easy target when it comes to that. We live in a binary world now where there has to be goodies and baddies, and if part of this role is to be the pantomime villain every now and then of rugby league, well then that's just the breaks, I suppose.
Nigel, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're a really busy man, and we all wish you the very, very best with this, because week after week, Stevo's phrase is, it's the greatest game of all, and you've got to save it. It's as simple as that, and there are problems both sides of the world, so all power to your elbow.
Thank you very much. Hopefully it's not as desperate as people think. I think it is. We're in good shape. We want to be in even better shape.
Nigel, thanks again, as I say. Privileged to be here. Great to talk to you. I'm sure people are fascinated by what you've said. That's it for this week. And Eddie and Stevo, the podcast. The man himself, not Nigel Wood, the beast that is Stevo, will be back next week. Till then, goodbye.